Okay, let's do it.
Well, everyone, welcome back to a very exciting episode of the Storybox podcast. I've been smiling because I was just told an amazing story from my guest today, and it's made me even more excited to speak to her today and to unbox her story. But Linda Thigh, is that correct? Hi. There we go. I got it right.
Hi,
okay.
Yes.
She is a mental health clinician, storyteller, and educator who has had her own lived experiences of individual, collective, historical, and cultural traumatization. How many of you listening can resonate with that? I know I can. And it doesn't stop there, but she's also worked on healing. She uses her background in trauma therapy, somatic therapies, and yoga to guide others through steps that help you to recognize and safely release tension through resourcing the body. She believes in empowering others through education and skills, thereby igniting potential and fueling your innate desire to learn, to grow, and to heal. Linda, can I welcome you so much to the Storybox podcast today?
Thank you so much, Jay. It's an absolute pleasure to be here.
The pleasure is all mine. I mean that wholeheartedly. I mean, I love hearing your amazing story, just like the snapshot of it. And I think this is a safe place for you, by the way. I just thought I'd say that because whenever we talk about trauma, bringing up old wounds, it kind of, there's trigger warnings and everything like that. So I want to make sure that you feel like you're safe here today in whatever you want to share. There is no pressure at all, but I just want to say that I respect you. I respect your story, and I'm excited to get to unbox it today. So thank you for being here. I normally ask all my guests at the very start is, this is one of my favorite questions, but I thought I'd start it with you as well. And that is, what does success look like for you?
Oh, it's funny because I actually think that success is a byproduct.
Mm.
Just like happiness is a byproduct, inner peace is a byproduct. And I think we all go awry when we chase success or chase happiness or chase inner peace.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they're byproducts of having moved through the things that are obstacles or stand in the way of our remembering of who we actually truly are at our core.
Mm.
Yeah.
When was the moment for you that you realized that was success? Was it this catalyst moment for you, or was it sort of a gradual thing over time?
Both and. I mean, there's some highlights of the last, couple of decades of my life, but there was this one moment where I was with my beloved. We'd bought 5 acres of land in Alaska Fairbanks outside of city limits where there's no building codes. Mm. So there's no council approvals, there's no building codes, there's no submissions, there's no architectural blah, blah, blah. If you want to build it, you go ahead and do it.
Wow.
And together, he and I had built a log cabin. Right, so we bought 5 acres of land, built a log cabin, no running water, and we're both 29, and so we're retired because we own where we live. And so all the pressures of toxic capitalism and consumerism was just like gone. And we could actually rest, we could heal, we could create, we could live, we could be empowered in making our own choices. And so for me, that was a moment of success for me.
Mm.
And I wouldn't have got there if I chased it intentionally. It was like a total byproduct. Mm. And another key moment of success for me was a couple of years ago when I assisted Dr. Besselvanderkolk with his private small group psychotherapy workshops, and just thinking to myself, the amount of work that I have put myself through in order to be able to be here, in order to be able to do this work, and the amount of pain that I've moved, of my own pain, right, that I've moved through my body so that I could be so blessed to be in this position and to hold this space for other people.
I want to get into all the pain, or not all of it, because I don't think we can share all of it, like this lifetime's worth. But, you've assisted Dr. Bessel. Now, for those people that don't know who he is, he wrote the best-selling book, The Body Keeps the Score. I highly encourage you to go and get a copy of it. Everyone has trauma in their life. Just want to say that, whether or not you've realized it, it's there. I'm curious, like you mentioned, you live in Alaska now. Mm-hmm. Why did you decide to move from, I guess you could say, Western society to Alaska, of all places, and buy your own land and build a log cabin and live without the pressures of capitalism and society and social media as well, all that stuff?
Yes. Well, they didn't have social media back when I moved to Alaska.
Good point.
Yes, but they did have television. And so I got to get away from television. Let's see here. So I was born in Vietnam, and I was born in post-war Vietnam. And so my family, in order to leave the communist takeover of Vietnam, because my dad was wanted by the communists, we fled by boat. So we were Vietnamese boat people. We were raided by pirates. We made it to a refugee camp off the coast of Malaysia. And then my little sister was born in the refugee camp. I'm 2.5. We lived there for about 6 months. My family gets sponsored out to Australia under a pilot rural resettlement scheme. So we land in Tumut in the middle of New South Wales in 1979. And after a couple of years there, we moved to Melbourne to be with more Vietnamese people who knew what we had been through and what we had survived, and forged what we could of a life for ourselves there. And yet for me, growing up in the suburbs of Melbourne, Noble Park, 4-bedroom brick house, quarter-acre block. For my parents, working in factories and that routine of the same every day, like healed something in them. But for me, growing up within that, I wanted more out of life, and I couldn't figure out what that was. Mm-hmm. And with what I know now, I look back and it's like my parents were just so traumatized. They were depressed and dissociated, and they weren't able to be there for us in the ways in which we needed. Mm-hmm. But there was that feeling of not feeling quite right in my own body, not feeling like I quite belonged. I didn't feel totally Vietnamese, and I didn't feel totally Australian. And so I kept trying. Like, I kept trying to figure it out. And I thought I just needed to find the right balance of the right boyfriend, the right job, the right leisure activities, the right amount of money, and then I would be happy. And I did the corporate thing. I realized it wasn't for me. Mm. Yeah. But I'd made one mortgage repayment on the townhouse that I'd bought at the time with my boyfriend, and I went, this isn't for me. The ladder's up against the wrong wall. So I quit that. I'd been waitressing for 7 years before that. So I kept waitressing. I realized I wasn't going to make enough money from that, right, to keep paying this mortgage. So I started working as a stripper. And then while I'm working as a stripper, I realized that I just need to apply all the things I learned in business school. Right? What's my unique sales proposition? What's, get my cash flow in order. And then I realized that I could actually set myself up for the rest of my life with the money that I'm making with this. Mm. But then I realized the question isn't how do I be happy or what makes me happy? The question actually is, who am I? And so I then start traveling. And that's a whole nother story about how I landed in Alaska. But I landed in Alaska. I discovered it after a series of events, and I just fell in love with the place. Mm. Because at the time I was working as a stripper, and I was also working as a stage manager. So, I'm loving the stage management work because I get to go to work, I get to do my gig, I get to write the invoice, and I get to go home. Whereas corporate life was just the churn, right? It was just the grind, and I just couldn't do that. And so for me, discovering Alaska was like this third place where it was a totally different world. Hunting, fishing, growing your own vegetables, picking berries, making jam, going canoeing, going hiking, and like the bigness of nature and all these fabulous people. Yeah. And then I fell in love with a man, and then I'm like trying to juggle the stripping and the stage managing with Alaska. And so we do that for about 4 years. During which time we buy some land, build a log cabin, and I realised that this is where I want to be. Mm. Yeah. So I got married, and then got really depressed after getting married, because I was one of those people that I said I'll never ever get married. Right? And the thing is, when you've got two separate citizenships going on, you kind of got to get married to have the relationship continue for longer than a 3-month tourist visa.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I got married in the midst of I'm depressed because I'm married and I'm waiting for my green card to come through. I have a friend who says, I've got a companion fair. Do you want to do this Vipassana meditation thing with me? And I'm like, hey, I'll go anywhere right now because I'm not allowed to leave the country. And so I do my first 10-day silent meditation retreat and it changes my world. And then shortly after that, I discovered yoga. And then it just became it became the platform for this growing self-awareness. And that was when I realized that I was a total addict. Yeah, I was addicted to using anything and everything that I could get my hands on outside of me, chemical and non-chemical. Yeah. To try and alter how I was feeling. And the feelings that I was doing anything to avoid was shame, rejection, criticism, abandonment. And here I was, I was just exerting more and more control over a smaller and smaller world. And I had to stop. And I wasn't realizing how miserable I was until the tools of meditation and yoga caused me to develop this self-awareness that made me realize all of this.
Mm.
Yeah. And then from there, I started teaching yoga and meditation in addiction recovery and trauma recovery. Realized it was only a twist or two of fate that there I could have gone, yeah, in terms of some pretty serious addictions. And read The Body Keeps the Score by Besselvanderkolk, and that changed my perspective on the world and on myself because all of a sudden I made sense. My family made sense. All the people I was raised around as a child made sense because I married a white man. Right. I only ever dated non-Asian men because I figured that there was something wrong with my people because I never saw anyone happy. But now I know it's because they were all traumatized. Yeah. And so, I mean, it was a lot to begin to unpack. And that book was the beginning of it for me. And then after that, I became a mental health professional, specializing in trauma recovery and healing from childhood trauma. And it's not just the things that happened that shouldn't have happened. It's also the things that didn't happen that should have happened, that changes how we move through the world. And so I'm doing my own growth and my own healing as I'm going through graduate school. And then along the way, I'm studying with Bessel 1 week every year in his experiential psychodrama workshops with Leisha Sky. And then at some point, I felt ready to approach him and ask, can I please assist at your private small group workshops? And so that's been a highlight for me. And then just the ongoing work in this field has been so profoundly moving for me. And yet it's that Alaska piece. Yeah, because how you live is so much more important than what you do. And I still live without running water. I still live without a television. Yeah. I only got a cell phone like 5 years ago.
So there's a lot for me to sort of unbox there. And I sort of want to go back to the very beginning if we can and sort of work our way through each of the stories. There's like so many questions I want to ask you. So I'm going to try and pace myself. Do you remember fleeing from Vietnam? And do you remember all the craziness that unfolded with that?
No, I don't remember any of that. And I actually have really few childhood memories. Yeah, like for me, my first memories started when I was like 4 or 5 years old, which I learned is kind of old. And then I remember being in primary school and having like memories vague in and vague out.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, of running across the cricket pitch and kicking the footy around and playing dodgeball and British Bulldogs.
Did you have any sort of painful memories that came
nothing
or blank?
Nothing. That's why the body keeps the score, changed everything for me, because trauma survivors don't have memories, they have symptoms, and I had all the symptoms. Yeah. And that explained it to me. Like, that was why my nervous system was all over the place.
Yeah.
That was why I struggled with human relationships. Yeah. That's why I struggle with memory and the past and the future and having a coherent sense of time and place.
Yeah.
And struggle to be
childhood trauma. Yeah.
Childhood trauma. Yeah. Struggle to be in my body. Mm-hmm.
I know. I know all that because I've experienced trauma for myself from a very young age. And I call it like a traumatic daze, kind of like what you were talking about, how you don't really know that it is there until kind of like the veil is lifted a little bit, and then it all makes sense. Mm-hmm. And then that's what happened with me. So I'll be real. So sexual abuse when I was 6, not knowing who I was, lack of identity. I was different, bullied in primary school, high school, struggled a lot mentally, education. I had to work hard, had a lot of death from people close to me. So I had all this crazy, and, grew up in a lower middle class, I guess you could say I was middle class, family. And then just sort of had to, in my later years, 14, depression, but I had a lot of health issues. So I was born with, I could go through a whole list, Linda, absolutely crazy, but this is not about me. But what I want to allude to is that when the veil was lifted from my eyes and I finally read this book, but also this book, it made a ton of sense. Like, I didn't expect it to make sense either. I was just going through the motions, thinking that I could do my own healing for a long period of time. But then I realized, hang on a minute, I need to go and get help from someone. I need to go and speak to someone about this and get all the hurt out and start talking it through, which is one of the strategies about healing with trauma, I believe. So for you, Linda, growing up in like this cultural differences and not knowing your place or where you are, how did you finally discover who you were as a person and be comfortable with that, have the peace and understanding that this is who Linda High is?
Yes. I think it's a process that happens over time. Yeah, because if it happened all at once, it would have been overwhelming.
Yeah.
And my sense of me and my own body is like I've got a 6-foot wall of cotton wool strapped around me, like the marshmallow man moving through the world, and I don't feel myself. And it's like every time a piece of cotton wool gets taken away, I feel a bit more defenseless. Yeah. And for me, it was the yoga and meditation, like a solid 10 years of that allowed me to tolerate the present moment and allowed me to tolerate sensations. And, I remember going to yoga class, and the style of yoga I fell in love with was power yoga. So it was hard, it was fast, it was really intense. And part of what trauma does to the brain and the body is that I mistake intensity for intimacy. So I chase sensations, and yet at the same time, I'm hypersensitive to other things. And so I'm noticing myself on the yoga mat competing, comparing, bitching and moaning, ragging out on the yoga teacher, ragging out on the folks around me. And the thing is, how you do one thing is how you do everything. So on my yoga mat is my life, right? It's the harsh inner critic over and over and over again. And so through being able to just focus on the breath, right, and to breathe, I was able to create more and more space between myself and my thoughts. And then through 12-step groups, which is a sharing circle, I was able to tolerate talking about my feelings first by hearing other people talk about their feelings and their lives, and to be inspired and in awe of that, until eventually I started to talk about my life. And so that was another layer, but that took another, I know I've been in groups now for close to 10 years, but it took like a solid 4 years for that to gain traction. And then reading The Body Keeps the Score, all those therapy models that Bessel talks about, I went and got trained in them. And the reason I got trained in them is because I live in a rural area, and getting access to providers who are trained in those modalities was like a not proposition that was going to happen. And so my way of accessing my healing was going and getting trained in those modalities. And so I used the trainings as ways in which to integrate those therapy modalities by learning it from the inside out. And so I got trained in IFS and internal family systems and sensory motor psychotherapy, studied with Bessel in his version of psychodrama, and then also got trained in neurofeedback as well as the safe and sound protocol, havening touch, flash technique, like other brain and body-based techniques, because I know from my own lived experiences that being in a room with a therapist and doing talk therapy wasn't going to be enough. Like, it wasn't going to work. It was just going to re-traumatize me, and I could just keep talking in circles and circles and circles. Yeah. Yeah.
I think the breath is so important, and we often take it for granted. And so many people, they don't know the sheer power of it. And I say to people, like, one of the pieces of advice that I give to people, if they do feel like they are being triggered, or if they have like a thought come into their brain, I say blink twice and then breathe in and out. So the blink twice gets you to think that you're triggered. So now I'm going to put in the other practice of breathing in and out to sort of heal and remove that thought and replace it with something else. So the blinking was just like the realization, and then in and out, in and out. Breathe through the nose. I spoke with, I don't know if you know James Nestor.
Yes.
I spoke
love his book.
Same here. I've got it there somewhere too. But he was talking about how we've kind of lost the art of breathing and how we need to bring it all back. Yes. And how breathing through the mouth changes our jawline. But breathing through the nose it's a calming mechanism. Mm-hmm. It calms your entire body. So if you're feeling like you are triggered, or if you're feeling like you do have a lot of tension and pain, that breathing through your nose in and out, just being slow, being present with, and being grounded in nature, that helps to relieve the tension and take you on this healing journey, I guess you could call it, of healing your own sense of trauma. So one of the things that I wanted to ask you about, for those people that don't actually know some of Bessel's healing trauma therapies, are you able to share which one has helped you the most, or is it a combination of all of them?
It was a combination of all of them. It's like there's a scaffolding that happens with each modality that I learned and integrated. And with each one, I learned to be able to attune towards myself and the wounds of my inner child, as well as the searing pain that I was doing anything to not ever feel. And yet, that which you use to avoid your pain ends up becoming the source of your pain. Yeah. Yes.
So can we dive into, you mentioned that you worked more or less as a stripper. Mm-hmm. Was that traumatic for you at all?
No, it wasn't. It was incredibly empowering. Yeah.
Why was it empowering?
Because I was in charge. I got to call the shots. It was like, hey, you come over here, sit down, give me your money. Yeah. I got to actually use my hypervigilant trauma sixth sense to actually good use. because I could walk through the club and go, oh, you've just got here and you're on your first drink, you're on your third drink, but I'm not on your radar and I can tell that. And you're already mine, so I don't have to worry about you. And you're tossing up between three women. Yeah. So I'm going to go for you first. Yeah. And then the one who's already waiting for me and he's mine, I'm cool. I can just slot him in whenever. And this guy at the bar who's just got here, I'll just, swing past and say hi. But times like 10 people, 20 people, 30 people in a space, and I'm able to walk through the space and know exactly where everyone is at all times and to make it feel really seamless. Yeah.
Did you ever feel like you didn't have control? Was there any of those moments?
No. It's funny because people have a perception of strip clubs and of strippers. And this period of my life was from 2001 until about 2012. So this is before the internet porn explosion. Yeah. This is before the ready accessibility of basically of internet pornography. And we also have in Australia decriminalised sex work. Yeah. And so the people who go to strip clubs go there for different reasons than going to a brothel. And you can go to a brothel if you want. Yeah, there was like 3 in the immediate area of the club that I worked at. And so it was a very different clientele. And I actually found a sense of humanity in there that I got to experience that I wouldn't have experienced anywhere else. One of my regulars was a blind man. Yeah, and he would love to run his fingers through my hair and feel my hair like against his face and just, the smells. Yeah. And one of the men I danced for regularly, his wife had died of cancer. He was older, he was in his 50s, 60s. His wife had died of cancer well over 10 years ago. And I was the first woman that he'd interacted with, in such a way. Yeah. And I would see a lot of men who were divorced but weren't ready to start dating. And so they wanted a safe place where they could just begin to enjoy female company. Men who had some social anxieties. And so just the opportunity to talk, to be with people and just talk. And I don't know, I just have I have a bigger space in my heart now for men. I mean, I used to carry a comb in my purse, and I'd hand my comb to people and to just sit there while someone combs my hair, and that moment of sweetness and tenderness that is missing from someone's life can be so restorative to a sense of humanity. And there's a strange juxtaposition that you find that in a strip club. And there were so many amazing, amazing women that I worked with. I worked with a deaf stripper.
Oh, wow.
Like a deaf stripper, yeah. And like this is, there's showgirls and then there's hustlers, and this club wasn't set up for showgirls. I mean, you had your time up on the podiums, but it wasn't like a big podium stage. And so, so you actually made most of your money through hustling. And one of the girls I worked with was deaf, or is deaf. She's still deaf, right? And how inspiring, how inspiring. And I saw women of all shapes and sizes. And what I saw through that and through my own changes in shapes and sizes over the years is that men love women, and we're so much harder on ourselves than what men are. And it's all about how you carry yourself and to have that exuberance for life shine through. Yeah. I also got to experience all the various female archetypes. I got to be the vixen. I got to be the bitch. I got to be innocent. I got to be tender and vulnerable. I got to be somewhere in between. And that traumatized part of me really enjoyed being able to figure out what it was that was needed in that moment, because the money in your pocket was mine. Yeah. Yeah.
What experience?
Yeah, the women. I work with performing artists. I work with women doing their PhDs. I worked with, it wasn't the stereotype of addicted single mothers. Yeah. Like it wasn't that at all. It was actually incredibly, it was remarkable, that period of my life.
I think
it was attachment theory in action.
Yes, 100%. You said it. I mean, there's so much to that. I mean, I think there's definitely this stigma. I mean, I grew up in a very conservative Christian household, so those places, internet pornography, all of that, anything sexual was demonized and said you can't go anywhere near it. God doesn't like that or love it, and you're disobeying God, and no one wants to do that if you're a Christian. So I didn't really question, but then I found myself getting addicted to porn anyway. Curiosity was so much more. And then that only sparked the trauma that was already within me 10 times more. So by me not having access or having this teaching early on, the right kind of teaching, like making it sort of the norm, so to speak, not to say that it's right or wrong, but it's just that I was not used to it, if that makes sense. And then when it's sort of like, once again, the veil was lifted, I opened up myself to this whole new world. And I didn't really know how to handle it. So a lot of people, I find, they don't know how to handle it either. And then, but I think what you've realized with doing that job is that men do love women. Yes. They also carry a ton of pain that they might not feel comfortable with sharing with someone else. So they go to those places as a way to, I guess, unwind and try and find some sense of healing, if I can say that. Did you find that too?
They're trying to find some sense of connection.
Yeah.
And the anonymity allows for a more authentic connection. I actually found that the strip club was where I've experienced some of the most authentic relationships that I've ever had, because there's an anonymity there, and the money, you're not going to get my phone number. We're not going to date, and no, we're not going to have sex. You're going to give me $50, and then you're going to give me another $50, and then you're going to come again next week. Yeah. And it sounds like harsh and businesslike, and yet it's not, because that creates a boundary.
Yeah.
Yeah. It creates a boundary.
So do you need to create boundaries in your life as a way to heal trauma?
Yes. Yes. That's a really good question, actually. Yeah, I think you do, because for those of us who've experienced the traumatization of boundary violations, we don't know what boundaries are. Yeah. And so when someone tries to enact a boundary with us, we experience it as you pushing me away. We don't experience it as creating a space for safety.
Yeah.
Yes.
And then you yourself, if you don't understand the boundaries there for that person in that relationship that you're in, and that boundary contributes to your trigger, but you don't know it's a trigger in the first place, it can only spark a world of hurt. And that person doesn't understand. They're just looking at, hey, you've broken my boundary. That's not right. But you don't understand that you've broken the boundary in the first place. So now it's sort of like, hey, how do we come together and actually mend that? Like, how do we, if we don't know that it's there, how do we know that it's there in the first place? How do we see the trauma? How do we recognize it? And then how do we also recognize that this person has created a boundary for me, whatever it is? So yeah, like that's what I'm I've been looking at more recently is how can I set up boundaries in my life so then I don't get triggered, but then that also helps my relationships with people. So then, and I'm honest and open with them.
Mm-hmm.
Say, hey, I have these triggers. I've created boundaries around them. Can you respect those, please?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that's what I've been sort of researching more on and trying to do
Mm-hmm.
my best. So I don't know if you've sort of looked at something similar in your life.
Yes. Yes. You know, there are so many avenues to answering that question, right? And each one is a scaffold. Yeah. So the patterns and characteristics of codependency, you know, from Codependence Anonymous, because that also gives recovery patterns, being able to learn about attachment theory, right? The fear of engulfment or the fear of enmeshment, and then the fear of abandonment.
Yeah.
And this seesawing back and forth between abandonophobism and abandonoholism. Yeah, that we're always living on the precipice of. Yeah, recognizing that brick walls aren't boundaries. Yeah, recognizing the ways in which we've misused boundaries in the past, because boundaries aren't a way to wake someone up, teach someone a lesson, make someone feel jealous, make someone regret their behavior. Right? Yeah. And I've found that nonviolent communication skills have been wonderful, and also recognizing that I become like the 5 people I hang out with the most.
Yeah.
And so recognizing the people who do listen or are able to listen or willing to listen and respect my boundaries. Why don't I have more of them in my life and less of these other people?
And that's why I love the sense of community as well. Like when you do go to like those 12-step programs and there's a group of people there, we're all going through similar things. So you all kind of know, like when you do share and you do feel comfortable to open up to share, it's kind of like you are respecting their boundary as well, because it's like we're in this together. We're all here to try and find healing together. So let's share our own story. And that's what I've realized with this, Linda, is stories matter. They're the most important thing on the face of the earth. They are innate with each and every one of us.
Yes.
They are capable of changing the absolute fabric of our innate humanness. So if we can value that, if we can tap into our story, and if we can share it with someone else that may be struggling, then maybe, just maybe, we might be able to help them heal, or at least spark the path of healing. And that's why I appreciate your story, even though I haven't heard all of it. So
thank you, Jay. It actually makes me think about all the stories that I collected as a stripper. Yeah, that people just wanted someone to share a story with, and not like, you know, having a beer at the pub kind of story.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you have any regrets from that period of time?
I wish I had saved more money.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I think there was that. I actually had a lot of fun. Yeah, I was serious. I was focused. And I also had a lot of fun. I think maybe it's not a regret. I wish I had stayed in touch with some of the magnificent women. Yeah. But this was before Facebook and social media and cell phones.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Is there a specific story during that period of your life that sort of challenged your understanding of the world around you?
Yes. Yes, 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 yes. I'm trying to sort through the various stories. You know, I was at one particular club for 7 years, and so I had regulars who would come and see me every week. And it was really easy at the start to try and think of them as desperate or as lonely. But what I recognized was the need for human touch and for human connection. Yeah. And one of my regulars was a man named Kevin. And the only person I stayed in touch with, right? Because, that period of my life where I'm doing the bipolar lifestyle and I'm going back and forth between Australia and Alaska, and in Australia I'm stripping and I'm stage managing, and then I'm going to Alaska. And so, my regulars at the club knew that I'd only be there for certain periods of the year now. And so they were part of my life as well. I wasn't just part of their lives. And at the start, it was this thing of, oh, yeah, I'm just part of their life. And, right. But after a while, it was like they were part of my life. They were like, hey, I'm saving up for a bobcat. Right, I'm saving up for some lumber. I'm saving up for my trip back. Yeah, and Kevin was one of those folks that I actually stayed in touch with, and we wrote letters back and forth. And he's the only person who sends me a birthday card each year, and he's the only birthday card I send. And we also send a Christmas card to each other. And once again, it's the only Christmas card I get. And Kevin died in May. Yeah. And so when I found out the news, because he actually talked with me about me to his family, he was in his 80s when he died. His daughter found me on Facebook and connected with me and let me know about her dad's passing. And so I only found out last week. And I then sat and thought about it, and I realised I'd known Kevin for 20 years. Right. Yeah. And there's this thing that I believe is so instinctual in all humans, and it's the desire to be known. Yeah. Yes. Yes.
What's this all about? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Viktor Frankl. Yeah.
Yeah.
Have you read Man's Search for Meaning?
Yes.
Yeah. He says that man can live without sex, they can live without objects, but they can't live without meaning.
Yeah. 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 And embedded within meaning is connection to something bigger than me. Yeah. Or something other than me. Yeah. And so for me, just the knowing of Kevin and the holding of his story has been so incredibly meaningful for me. And here I was going into an industry thinking, yeah, I'm going to make money and it's going to support me in my life endeavors and spiritual endeavors and other endeavors. Yeah. But I think in so many ways, I got so much more out of it than the money that I made.
I appreciate you sharing that story, and I'm sorry that he passed. I mean, that's hard. Loss, grief, whole bit, especially when you've known someone for a long period of time, then suddenly they're not there anymore. That in of itself is traumatic. It's like, how do we understand that?
Yeah.
How do we find meaning around it? It's like, yeah.
It's also that trauma survivor thing where I forget a lot of things, right? Because I am a little bit dissociative and I forget a lot of things. And he's someone who witnessed me during that period of my life. And so therefore what I went through was real. It's been such a long time now since I danced that it feels like that was someone else and that was another life and another lifetime ago. And he was there for that period of my life, which then makes it real. And I forget. Yeah.
Sort of reminding you of that period of your life.
Oh, yeah.
Where you did learn a lot. And that's like example for me, because I'm still 24 and I feel like I've lived a number of lifetimes already with the amount of things that I've had to experience. And I just say to people, age is but a number. It's not everything. I mean, I think society has made it such an important thing. Like we celebrate every single year our birthday. Like we've traveled around the sun one more time or something like that. It's like we place so much emphasis on the age point, but we don't place a lot of emphasis on the experience point of this person. Like what have they got to share in their life? What's their story? And, you know, like I say, oftentimes people have told me that my age goes against me. And I was like, no, my age goes for me, because I have been able to experience, as I'm sure you have, Linda, a lot. And now I'm able to hopefully share that with others like you're doing now, Linda, so that they might be able to realize that they are worth something, that they have meaning and purpose already just by being here, by being alive.
Yes. Yes. And I often think about some of my regulars, right, some of whom just didn't have many social skills, and it would be easy to judge them. Yeah, as Scotty got no friends, the way we used to judge kids in primary school. And, you know, and because they were giving me money, I was like, okay, I'll be all right. But it was just such a joy over time, because I saw, and I still think about these people. I mean, there was one man who made his money like putting bets on the greyhounds and on the horse races, right? But he didn't have much of a life outside of that. And another person made money playing blackjack and going to casinos around the world and doing blackjack tournaments. Wow. And so these people with neurodivergent brains who engage with the world differently, and so they don't have the same desire or aptitude or ability to grease the wheels of social interactions. Yeah, another regular I had was the guy who gets employed by a big law firm or company, a corporation, and he carries your documents in a briefcase, and he's handcuffed to the briefcase, and the briefcase has a lock on it, and he goes through the airport, like he travels to other parts of the world connected to this briefcase of documents.
That's not just a movie thing.
It's not just a movie thing. And he'd been doing it for like 30 years of his life. And because he's in such high demand and he travels so much, he doesn't have friends. Yeah. Or he can't find like a touchstone, you know, because our friends, our families, or our jobs, they become touchstones. And when you don't have that, you know, you find them in other ways.
It's not living. It's not living.
And yet yes, and it's a story worth telling.
Yes, very true.
Yeah. Yeah, and I would be sitting there and these people would be telling me the stories of their lives, which they were like bored with because they've been doing it for 20, 30 years. And I'd be like, you do what? You're what? You do what? Yeah. Yeah.
So later on in your life, the place you are at now,
yes.
Did you ever think that you would be here?
No, absolutely not, because I wasn't interested in helping other people. Yeah, I didn't even realize I had wounds inside of myself that needed to be healed. I was just living in my own cycle of trying to get more or less or better or worse of the same over and over again. Yeah. And I figured if I had more money, then I could figure out the next piece whenever the next piece came. But let's just start with like having some money, because here I was like, you know, the early 2000s, two parents. My mother had a 9th grade education. My dad had a 6th grade education. They both worked in factories. You know, working class background. They sent me to a private girls' school, which just wasn't the right place for me. And thinking that I needed to have a career to get ahead, and a career just wasn't the thing for me. And yet I'm caught in the machinations of the wheel of capitalism. And so I figured if I just took care of myself first and made money, then I'd be able to figure out what happened next with that money somehow. And then and if you had said healing to me, I mean, it was funny. When I left my corporate job, my boss at the time gave me this book by Louise Hayes, and it's the book You Can Heal Yourself. And I remember looking at it going, why'd you give me this? I mean,
what are you trying to say?
Yeah. And I didn't get it. I didn't get why she gave me the book. I was like, huh? Yeah. And I look back at that moment now, I think it's hilarious. Absolutely hilarious. So I was like double Zen. I was ignorant of my ignorance. And yeah, I was totally unaware that I was in need of healing. If anything, I was one of those anti-healing people. Yeah. Yeah, because I'd experienced that sense of shame around something being wrong with you. And so here I was going through the world all armored up and taking everyone down.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Same here. You walk around like you allow the ego to sort of creep. It doesn't really creep. Well, most of the time it creeps up inside you and you hardly know that it's there. And then before it's too late, oftentimes it's done a lot of damage to your life and to the lives of other people. So you're basically passing your trauma onto someone else so they can experience their own form of trauma as well. And yeah, it's crazy. So I think being able to recognize that the ego is there, remove it, heal from it, because the ego is going to come back eventually if we allow it to come back. So yeah, I mean, one of the questions that I did want to ask you that just sort of came to my mind right now is, what do you love the most about yourself and your story?
Yeah, you asked some pretty awesome questions.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think, what do I love about myself and my story? That I kept listening to my inner voice and inner guidance. Even when it led me into mishap after mishap, I looking back, I needed to experience the ways in which I was avoiding my own pain by inflicting it onto others.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And yet in that listening to that voice, I also did things that a lot of other people don't do. You know, I think nearly every overseas trip I've done has been by myself. Yeah, I wasn't going to wait for anyone to give me permission. I was just going to go and do it.
Yeah.
And I was done with waiting for other people to get ready or get themselves together to be able to do the things that I wanted to do. So I just went ahead and did them. And that has always held me in really good stead. Yeah.
I think I need to, when COVID ends, like that's the only thing that is stopping me right now, because believe it or not, 2020 was the year that I wanted to travel. I wanted to experience the world. I wanted to, because I'm a huge history nerd. So I love the process of learning, and just the sheer element of learning the stories of our past ancestors that have come before us, and learning about their traumas as well, and how they either recognize that it was there or how they were able to heal from it too, like all that stuff. Yeah, but then COVID hit, and believe it or not, I've never been on a plane. So I still need to experience a lot of things.
Yes.
Yeah, so
come to Alaska.
That was my. I want to go to Alaska actually, because you've given me this great picture of Alaska. Is it really cold there?
It can be. It can be.
Good to know. I love the cold though.
Yeah. No, we see, where I live in Alaska, we see 40 below a lot of winters. And we have no wind chill, which is really fortunate. And the air is super dry. And so it's so dry that you get spontaneous blood noses because we nose breathe. So because if you nose breathe, the cold air takes longer to get to your lungs, whereas if you mouth breathe, you can frostbite your lungs. And so you learn to nose breathe, and you learn to nose breathe really slowly when it's really cold. And and yet it can dry out the skin here, and so you get these spontaneous nosebleeds, and it's okay. The blood freezes pretty quickly.
Your blood freezing. Oh, that'd be a sight.
Yeah, on the outside of you.
Hey, it's like Bob's got a blood nose. Oh, that's normal here.
Yeah.
Don't stress. It's all good. It'll heal.
But the thing I love about the cold here is it forces you to slow down.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I grew up in Melbourne, and like you could ignore the weather every day of the year, but here you actually have to pay attention. And it forces you to slow down, and it's fantastic to slow down.
I need that, actually. I have a habit of going 1,000,000 miles an hour. It's not necessarily a great habit, I will admit, but that has contributed to some of my health issues in the past. And I've had to work on that. And because I'm one of those, high achievers, want basically for myself, not for others. Like I want to do a lot of things, and I feel like I don't have enough time. So I get a little bit of impatient there and end up causing myself a lot of pain and hurt and grief. And that also passes down to my family too. So it's, lots to work on, which is managing stuff. So anyway, I know I'll get there, and I appreciate you sharing your story today, Linda. My final question for you. This is my all-time favorite question. I ask everyone at the end of all my conversations. A hypothetical one, but I want you to imagine with me for a moment that you've been able to reach the age of 100. All your friends and your family have decided to put together a film for you of everything you've ever said and everything you've ever done. Don't ask me how in the world they got it all. We'll call it magic for the sake of argument, I know. But they've been able to get it all and show it to you on your 100th birthday. What do you want that film to say and to show about your life?
She didn't die with potential. Yeah, I didn't take my potential with me to the grave.
Wow.
Yeah. Like I lived my life in Technicolor, and I got to experience the fullness and the depth of the human spiritual condition within myself and with and through other people. Yeah. Yes. And that I lived as a part of the earth. Yeah, because the thing that gets lost, I find, because my life is on podcasts and interviews and Zoom classes, and you see this much of me, is that people don't actually get to see, the log cabin in the woods and the hunting and the fishing and the growing food and the composting toilet or the outhouse, the pee rag that I've got on the line outside that I've been using for well over 10 years, well before COVID.
Wow.
Yeah, that I lived as part of the earth rather than living on the earth.
Wow.
Yeah.
The perfect send-off message. Where can people find you, Linda, connect with you, learn more about you, listen to some of your other interviews as well?
Sure. It's www.linda-thai.com, LINDA-THAI.com. Yeah.
No social media at all?
I am on Facebook, and I have a business page and a personal page. You can friend me on either. I don't do Twitter. It confuses me.
No, don't worry.
TikTok confuses me. Yeah, a lot of things confuse me.
I love it. Well, thank you so much, Linda, for your time today, your stories, everything that we have spoken about has been a help to me, and I have no doubt will be a help to countless others. So thank you so much for coming on the Storybox podcast.
Thank you, Jay. It's been an absolute pleasure.